You might consider yourself a smart prepper, but how do other people look at you? Do they look at you like, crazy Aunt Mary or loony Uncle John who hides cans of food under his bed and has toilet paper up in the garage rafters? Do they look at you as a hoarder or as a smart, prepared person ready for any emergency? Well, what's really the difference between a prepper and a hoarder? So I recently read this article. It was an opinion piece in CNN, and it was about the problem with the growing food hoarders. And at first glance, I just kind of glanced through it, it made me upset because it seemed to me that it was implying that people who were preparing for emergencies, preppers, were food hoarders. But then I read it a little more carefully. I still find the article a little disturbing because it says, while this might have worked out well for people during the COVID-19 pandemic, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's kind of the purpose of it. So it still, to me, was, putting a little shade on those who prep. But let's look at what's the difference in motivations between a prepper and a hoarder. Hi, I'm Prepper Potpourri. I've been making videos for over a decade. Videos on food preparation and preservation, emergency preparedness, and cooking, gardening, and other household maintenance videos. And I hope you join my community and subscribe for even more videos on emergency preparedness. But let's get back to this video. So, what's the difference? How do you know if you're a prepper or are you a hoarder? Well, food hoarding is kind of defined as being a mental condition brought on by irrational fears or psychological distress, and where maybe an emergency stockpiling is rational. In this case, in hoarding, it's not. And the distinction is crucial, but let's look at it. It states that having food there is a form of emotional safety, coming from a place of feeling deprived. But it's not necessarily physically deprived from food, but maybe emotionally having some deprivation or scarcity mindset around food. And for adults or children with money, it can mean going out and buying large quantities of food and sometimes stashing it in hiding places as well. Well, many preppers do have caches of food and food stored secretly in their house. So does that make them a hoarder? And preppers do get emotional comfort for knowing that they have the food put away to be able to help their family in an emergency. So does that make them a hoarder? And one of the experts commented, the key thing is how much time and space is this taking up in your life. If it feels like it's stopping you from doing the things you enjoy or interfering with your quality of life, it's definitely a good idea to seek out support. And yes, some preppers, especially newbie preppers, do let it kind of consume their life and they worry about all the what ifs. So does that make you a hoarder? So far, motivation's very similar between a hoarder and a prepper. But the article does make a distinction. Hoarding is a compulsive behavior that leads to hoarding food and supplies beyond what can be reasonably used. And that's the key, beyond what can be reasonably used. And it results in wasted food, cluttered living spaces, and often depleted incomes. So there's the main core difference. But I found some other differences too. It's important to understand fear and anxiety. And I believe it's often fueled by the media. And that can lead to panic buying and hoarding. There's sensational headlines, this is going to be scarce or this is going to happen. And people rush to the grocery store and stock up on supplies. But this urgency and fear, what we call panic buying, can drive people to make irrational decisions. I mean, they might be buying food that they don't even eat because it's available on the shelves, and they might take everything that's on the shelf, right? So they are hoarding, so no one else can get something they might need. So it's very easily for a panic buyer to become into that hoarder continuum. And it can happen to some preppers too. So a panic buyer rushes to the store when there's a shortage of an item. Let's remember the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you remember when, let me get it. Yeah, this was in short supply. That's right, toilet paper. Unfortunately, a lot of preppers did not have toilet paper or enough toilet paper in their stockpile. So they became panic buyers, and whenever they saw toilet paper, if they could, they would take as many rolls as they could back. Well, this ended up other people not being able to get the toilet paper, and then there was this run on toilet paper, and the people who actually manufacture the toilet paper couldn't keep up with this increased demand, when the truth is we still only needed as much toilet paper as before. But panic buying and hoarding became a problem. And I fell into that too. I did not have enough toilet paper. I felt stored, so whenever I saw it, I took whatever I could, but I shared it with people at work and people who weren't able to get out because of the pandemic for it. But I learned that I needed more toilet paper probably in my preps. And I hope a lot of people learned from this, because panic buying can result in hoarding, can result in depleted supplies and affect others. And that's not the purpose of prepping. So hopefully people learned from this, learned what maybe supplies they needed that were in short supply during the pandemic, and are now preparing for it. Emergency stockpiling is a rational activity focused on being prepared for unexpected events or natural disasters or economic disasters. It makes sense. Hoarding, not so much. And prepping involves strategic planning, regular maintenance to make sure supplies are always ready to use, and that also differentiates it from hoarding. So I believe the difference kind of boils down to 3 key points. Preppers differ from hoarders in that they have a rational plan. They organize their food supplies. It's not willy-nilly all over the house. And they know how much of each supply they have and when it might expire. And they use those supplies before they go to waste. So that's the difference, in my opinion, between a prepper and a hoarder. So if you're kind of new to prepping and you want to create an emergency stockpile of food and supplies, I have some tips for you. You're going to have to properly plan, inventory, and rotate. Let me explain. Start small. Take time to plan what you need. I suggest trying to come up with a 3-day supply first, and then gradually work, double, triple, until you get up to the amount of supplies you think you need. Most emergencies don't last longer than 2, maybe 4 weeks at the most. So a month's supply of emergency food is fantastic. But if you feel you need more, maybe you're afraid of unemployment on the horizon and you'd like to rely on preps that you have, then please increase your preps. You can increase them to 6 months, a year, whatever you feel comfortable with and that you will reasonably use. And always store what you eat what you store. Don't go out and just buy beans and rice because you see that in videos. If your family doesn't like beans, buying a 50-pound bag of pinto beans is probably not a good idea. Buy what your family will eat. And track your usage. Save your grocery store receipts. Do it for a couple months. Then you can see what you usually are buying, how fast you go through an item, and you can come up with a plan on how much you need of a certain item for a certain period. Make a list of meals that your family would normally eat in 1 week. And then supplement. What could you use that's shelf stable for those fresh and frozen ingredients? It's a great way to come up with an emergency meal list. And if you're interested in shelf stable recipes, we had a whole playlist on this. A bunch of us got together and made fantastic recipes using only shelf-stable ingredients from our pantry. I have the link down below. Oh, and don't forget to include water in your emergency food. Very, very important. In fact, this is more important very often than the food. Proper storage. Once you got your stockpile, you gotta keep your food and supplies safe. Be sure they're stored properly so there can't be any rodent or bug damage. You don't want your emergency food supplies to spoil. And then something else that sets off the prepper from the hoarder is organization. So make sure you label your containers and organize your supplies in a pleasing fashion. Don't have them all over the house willy-nilly. Remember, clutter is the sign of a hoarder. And always write the best use or expiration date on each item stored. Regularly check your supplies and use the first in, first out method to keep your supplies usable. And make sure you have an inventory of what is in your emergency stockpile. Otherwise, you might buy things you need and you might not have the things that you do need. So regularly maintain your inventory. And don't forget to include non-food essentials. You know, dishwashing soap, detergent, cleaning supplies, medical supplies, hygiene supplies, all of those type of things. And try to buy these on sale to ease the burden on your budget. And what I always say, rotate, rotate, rotate. Hoarders never rotate. You know what? If you're a good prepper, you do. You are not a hoarder, so you are going to rotate your supplies, first in, first out. True preppers minimize waste. So remember, the goal is to be prepared, not overwhelmed. By building a smart emergency stockpile, you can ensure that you and your family are ready for any situation without falling into the trap of panic buying. Preparation is about balance and foresight, not fear and panic. If your emergency stockpile includes rice, check out this video for shelf-stable rice recipe ideas. I think you'll be glad you did. Thanks for watching, and always share the knowledge.